Hello and welcome to the second episode of the Northern Ireland UFO Society podcast. In this episode, we're going to go through our usual segment of That's What I Call News. And then our guest this evening will be talking about the Pleiadians and her experiences with them. You really do not want to miss that one. And then after that, we'll talk about the NIUFOS Open Day. A couple more details coming up for that. If you want to join NIUFOS or just interested in who we are, then I suggest you come and meet us in Belfast on the 11th of May. Or 11th of March, I do beg your pardon. Then we'll talk about the one astronomical event that's happening. I suppose it's good for night watching, I suppose. But before we get into the news segment, we have a name. Special thank you to the people who sent us name suggestions, and a thank you to my team as well for helping me choose the name. And without you, we couldn't have done it. We've kept it simple. We are now known as the Close Encounters Podcast, the official podcast of the Northern Ireland UFO Society. Very, very exciting times indeed. So before we get on to the interview, let us talk about what's been happening in the world with That's What I Call News. Well, let's not ignore the elephant in the room. That's what I call news. So if you've been shielding yourself away from social media or even the mainstream media, then you won't know that this has happened. But it's quite obvious. The unidentified flying objects that have been intercepted by the US Air Force. So at the time of recording, 3 objects have been shot down, and there's one more currently being observed. So from the discovery a short time ago of a large balloon with like an array of equipment suspended from it, 3 more objects have been confirmed in US airspace. Now, while China is the chief suspect with potential spy equipment, others aren't so sure, with a description of the object shot down over Alaska, which is the most recent one, being cylindrical in shape and having similar characteristics to that of the Tic Tac UFO. So others are speculating that it could be a distraction from something else, or even the beginnings of Project Bluebeam. And I do hope to get somebody on at some point to talk a little bit more about Project Bluebeam. But if you're not aware of Project Bluebeam, I suggest you get online and research what it is. There's even a rumour, as of yet confirmed actually, that these objects have been seen over Canada, Russia and China itself. Now, I personally don't think that these are alien aircraft, going by the great ease that the US forces seem to be destroying them. But it is rather peculiar, and I will be following this topic with great interest. Get in touch and let us know your thoughts on that one. Moving over to the BBC, a mysterious whirlpool appeared recently in Hawaiian skies. So about 2 weeks ago now, residents on the Hawaiian Islands had been witness to a flying spiral in their skies one evening. So video footage, which can be seen by going to the link which I will provide in the show notes, shows the blue spiral cross the sky. Now, it's really, really impressive to look at. But it turns out that the spiral coincided with a recent SpaceX launch, suggesting that the spiral was produced by rocket exhaust. Now, if you cast your mind back to Norway in about, I think it was 2009, a massive spiral had appeared in the sky, which turned out to be the result of a problematic rocket launch by the Russians during one of their ballistic missile tests. But definitely recommend checking out that footage if you follow the link that's included in the show notes, wherever you get your podcast. Moving on to extremetech.com, scientists have discovered an insect that eats polystyrene. Now, you're probably wondering why I've chosen this story, but I'll explain it just as we progress. But a beetle larvae has been found in the wild that digests polystyrene. Now, scientists hope that this could lead to a solution to reducing the world's pollution of styrofoam, saying as it makes up in around 7 to 10%, if I remember correctly, of the non-fibrous plastics that are produced. So this sort of confirms to me, at least, that life doesn't have to exist as we know it or as our science knows it. So this larvae has existed for millennia before we even discovered it. And of course, a link to this story will be provided, as with the others. But before this discovery, scientists and our understanding of how life works would say that this is impossible, that they can't possibly live off that diet. Well, science needs to stop being so close-minded and a little bit more open-minded. I mean, we've even got bacteria that live in molten lava, for example, which would be inhospitable to life as we know, carbon-based life forms as us. But I do digress, and we will move on. But get in touch and tell me what you think about that. And finally, witnesses in Pennsylvania reported a silent triangle moving near a nuclear power station. This is from Newsbreak.com. Residents in Pottstown reported on the 9th of December, so this is last year, seeing a silent triangular spacecraft lurking in and around the vicinity of a nuclear power plant. The low-flying aircraft was seen to be heading south before turning west towards Limerick Generating Station, and interestingly enough, there was a similar incident at the power station back in 2003, a link of which can be found on the website newsbreak.com. And according to MUFON, the latest incident brought the number of reported triangular UFOs having been sighted to 38. Now, it really does make you think when you take into account the reported UFO activity at places like these during the Cold War, even disarming nuclear missiles at military establishments. So I am wondering what could be going on here. If anyone has any idea, I'd be interested in speaking to you. Now, let's end that there and move on with the interview. So, if like me you've been studying ufology for as long as I have, or even the metaphysical side, then you should be aware of the Pleiadians. My next guest has studied the Pleiadians for quite some time. Now, the Pleiadians so-called because they come from the Pleiades star system, also known as the Seven Sisters, and they're often described as tall, humanoid extraterrestrials with Nordic appearances, even some of them having interdimensional capabilities. Sora Ara, my next guest, has channeled them for quite some time. She's a renowned psychic, Pleiadian starseed, Pleiadian channel, Pleiadian hybrid, UFO abductee, contactee, and experiencer, and has been a channeler for the Pleiadians since childhood. And among many other disciplines, I will link her website into the show notes, and I do recommend that you check it out. But I have been talking to Soma a little bit earlier on just to get to know her, and I know she can hear me loud and clear. Soma, how are you keeping?
Hi, Chris. I'm really well, and I'm very much looking forward to our chat this evening and connecting, and looking forward to being heard by your listeners, actually.
No, I'm looking forward to getting your message out there because NIUFOS, as I was saying earlier, was founded on the principles of not just the UFO side, the physical UFO side, grey aliens and all that sort of stuff, but also the metaphysical side as well. And that's where I learned about the Pleiadians and the various other extraterrestrial species, potentially interdimensional as well. And I know that the Pleiadians have a vested interest in humans on Earth, which I'm sure you will explain a little bit shortly. But I want to go straight to your book because I was reading the blurb for your book, which is The Pleiadian Child, and you just said that you have another book out as well, which I'll give you a chance to talk about a little bit shortly. But the blurb, I was reading that I feel bad for you because it sounds like you've had a very rough start to life, a troublesome upbringing, which seemed to trigger all this and, well, develop you into the person that you are today.
Yeah, it really did. I had and I think the reason I had such a traumatic childhood is because I'm not a quick learner. I tend to have to do things to the extreme before I really get stuff. So I remember one of my earliest memories is when I was 8, and I apologize to anyone that I may upset, but I had a guy lying on top of me, um, and I left my body because I couldn't breathe. I was a skinny little thing. I was underfed, undernourished. I was just skin and bone, and I couldn't breathe. And he was a really big, heavy guy, overweight, and I just couldn't breathe. And I left my body, and I'll never forget the layout of the room because of this experience and another one I had when I was 12. But so I left my body and I connected to the Pleiadians, or they connected to me. and it only lasted, I think, maybe a few minutes or a few seconds. I actually forget now how long it was, but it was so quick. And I connected to the Pleiadians, and I didn't know who they were at the time, but from then onwards, I was always connected to them, always connected to them. And in more recent times, as an adult, I began to do shamanic courses in Ireland. And then I began to have some experiences where I began to remember part of who I am on a soul level. And having had lifetimes on the Pleiades star system and having known them before and connected to them before. So it, my connection to them, as many people's is, many people have connections to the Pleiadians. My connection to them, it goes back into past lives, as it does for many people.
Yeah, because I've heard of obviously the past life accounts and theories from other people where people have been regressively hypnotized, and then all of a sudden they've had this explosion of memory come back to them, like many past lives, not just on Earth, but I've heard of people on the Pleiades as well that have got those connections. And you also said that you had left your body at that point, and obviously it sounds like a horrible, traumatic experience. I can't even begin to understand what that's like. And I don't think I'd even want to, because it does sound horrible. But I've heard other accounts of people before as well, where they were pinned down to. This is a personal friend. I won't even name them, just in case they don't want to be named. But this is a personal friend of mine who said that they were pinned down by an unseen entity before. And the only thing that they could do, they couldn't even shout or scream out for anything, but they were crying out in their mind for help. And they swear blindly that this massive flash of light had appeared in the room, and whatever entity was there, it was like it was being dragged away. And would that be, I don't know, I don't want to be ignorant, equating it to your experience, but would that sound similar to your experience?
No, but I have not that particular experience, but I have had experiences like that, very similar. That yeah, very similar experiences that were more like sleep paralysis, except I was awake.
Yeah, and you obviously
Uh,
had much different circumstances, but when you're connecting to the Pleiadians, obviously you're going through that traumatic experience. That's a horrible thing to even comprehend, but that's where the connection come from, because you left the body. I'm sort of thinking, were you subconsciously crying out for help, and that's who had appeared.
Absolutely, yeah. That's exactly what happened. Except I left my body and I was no longer in my body. I was somewhere else. Um, I was on a different dimension, and no longer in my body. And I didn't know it was the Pleiadians at the time. But and with my childhood, I view it differently now. I really do, because I see the blessings in it. I see the beauty in it. I see how I was able to connect with the Pleiadians and my guides and spirit um and also fairies and nature spirits, all because of my childhood. So I kind of view it with a different perspective. Um yeah, I view it with a different perspective. I mean, I had other traumatic experiences as a child, but I do view it differently. I think it was chalk and cheese and sweet and sour and very cathartic. And I'm actually very grateful for my childhood, because it taught me so much, and the trauma gave me the ability to connect with the Pleiadians, which is just a beautiful thing. So it was a blessing in disguise, really.
Again, like I said, it sort of made you the person that you are today. But it's a harsh way to go about it. It really is. But because you've went through that, and you've left your body and you established contact to them, or established contact with them. I'm assuming that that's the point then where contact was constant, would it have been on demand, or would it have been at the beginning sporadic, where you couldn't control it?
At the beginning, it was definitely sporadic, and where I couldn't control it, and was given downloads of information throughout my childhood. Um, a lot to do with Egypt. Um, but I didn't know it was the Pleiadians that were downloading information to me at the time. I just thought they were my guides, which they are, but I didn't know who they were. I just kind of accepted them without question. I just assumed it was my guides, but now I know. I have a bit more information now.
And of course, that bit of information now, all that experience has enabled you to get information, presumably from them, which is went into your book. Then, so that's
Yes.
it's again, it's a horrible way to go about it, but it's made you who you are today, and quite unique in that sense. Are you still in contact with them today?
Oh yeah,
Constantly.
absolutely. The contact, the connection has never left me. It has only grown and got stronger. And I think once you connect with UFOs or spiritual experiences or channeling or any type of metaphysical connection, it never leaves you. It just becomes more as you get older, because it's like plugging in a socket. You're plugged in, and that connection never leaves.
Yeah, because I know I've heard this is slightly different. Where I've heard of children before having their invisible friends, or that's what the parents put it down to, or they recount their past lives until they hit about maybe 5 or 6 years old, and then it all disappears. They have that sort of amnesia, where they can't even even the child doesn't even remember having those experiences. But with you, that is like rules reversed, where from that point onwards, it's you've had that constant contact with these spiritual entities from the Pleiades.
Yes, yeah, I've really been blessed in that way with my connection to spirit. But it was through the trauma that allowed me to do it. And it's not even woo-woo stuff. It comes down to chemicals in the brain, because when you go through traumatic experiences, it releases an excess of DMT in the brain, which
Yes,
causes
I've heard
psychic
that.
awareness and abilities and clairvoyance. It opens kind of Pandora's box into the psychic world. So um, I'm truly grateful for that. And I was always was never the normal um, one in my family. And I, from I think perhaps the age of 6 or 7, I consciously remember some of my past lives, not all of them, because there'll be thousands of them. But I remember being in Dublin with my mum, and it was the first time I was there, and I was telling her the road names and what was around the corner and the buildings and who I was, um, and she didn't know what to make of me as a child when I would explain things like that to her. She didn't know what to make of me.
I mean, my listeners should already know that even I come from the island of Ireland. I'm from Northern Ireland, and especially if your family are religious. I even said this in the last podcast with Ed, actually. It's a very taboo subject. So, especially when it comes to the Republic of Ireland, which would be more Catholic than Protestant, where rules are first in Northern Ireland, it would be a very no thing talking about things like that. So I can really understand where you're coming from with that. But this is now, obviously, it shaped who you are. And not, if it shapes who you are, then it shapes what you do. And you've now incorporated this into your everyday life. And this is you. This is what you work with, and this is what you're trying to bring to the people with your book, all the information. And I really want to get a hold of your book because the blurb does actually fascinate me. And I've got a Kindle and I will be downloading it. I can promise you that because I really want to get in and know a little bit more about it. But for the likes of myself and the lay people, can you give us a general overview of what we can expect in your book and what it touches on?
Yeah. So um, the first section is my childhood from the ages of 8, roughly up until 16, because that is what I can remember. I don't really have much of a memory before the ages of 8 due to trauma. And then the second section of the book is channeled information directly from the Pleiadians. And then the third section, when I wrote it, it was about my present time and some experiences that I was, excuse me, going through at the time. So it's the third section is called the present, if my memory serves me correctly. And that was the present time at the time where my mum was passing away, or had passed away, I should say.
Uh, See that again, all that stuff absolutely fascinates me, and I really should be studying this stuff more. But personal, no, not personal life, professional life can get in the way quite a lot. With what I do as a drone pilot, it's always constant work all the time. Um, what is their message for humanity? So, whenever they speak to you, is the message for humanity, or is it for you, or is it for anything else in particular?
They it's they have so much information that they share with me. Um, it's rarely for myself. Sometimes it is if I'm um, in particular need of advice or guidance, but it's mostly for humanity. And there's just so much information they've shared with me. They've shared the oh, I don't know where to start with that, but it's I they have come in with such a love frequency that it affects me in such a positive way. Um, but they have so much information for humanity. So some of the things they've shared with me so far is about Atlantis and how that is connected to now with everything that we're going through. It's kind of we're in a reversal, is what they call it, of Atlantis. So at the down, which is connected to now, because at the downfall of Atlantis, um, negative ET around that time, negative ET energy came in and overthrew Atlantis. There was a large object or meteor that hit the Earth, which was intentional by negative ET energy to overthrow Atlantis and humanity at the time. And contracts were made and drawn up between negative and positive ET energies and races to claim ownership of the Earth, because the negative ET energy won the battle at the time, and now that contract has come to an end. So they call it the reversal of Atlantis, the time we're in now, where because there's many different aspects there are at play here. You have the contracts being torn up or have come to an end and been torn up or in the process of that. You have the earth realigning back onto her natural axis. You have the stars realigning or stars lining up. You have endings of periods of time. You have the all the prophecies that have been written about and prophesied. So there's a lot going on Earth at the moment. There's huge, major shifts because we are in ascension and our consciousness is raising, our awareness is raising, and we are uniting and coming together like never before. But we are actually changing. We are in physical, um, physically evolving and becoming much more aware, becoming much more aware of ETs and UFOs and various other things. But one of the other informations that they've shared with me is that all systems on Earth are run at the top level are run by negative ET energy. Um, so to me, that was profound when they first shared that with me, because it took me and it took me a number of years, 2, 3, maybe 4 years, to really process that and let that sink in, that all systems on Earth are run by negative ET energy. And that was before the days that I started to watch David Icke. So that doesn't come from him. That comes directly from the Pleiadians, excuse me. And that is huge. And I stand very strong in that core belief, in that core, it's not even a belief, it's an understanding. It's an inner standing that all the governments, the politicians, the TDs, the military, the political scenes, the big pharma, the doctors, the lawyers, every system on Earth is run by negative ET energy. And that is coming to an end, which is why we're seeing the world dissolving around us.
It's almost
And
like a
it's
collapse
all,
of a civilization as well, isn't it? I mean,
I'm sorry, let's go on.
it's almost like the collapse of a civilization as well, isn't it? That's
It
pretty much
is.
what we're witnessing, yeah.
It is. That's exactly what's going on. And when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning about how things are separate. Very much in the UFO community, where UFOs over here and some even channeling is over here. And you've got the healing, you've got Reiki, you've got shamanism, you've got mediumship, you've got spirit, you've got all these different kind of spiritual modalities going on. But actually, they're all connected. They're all connected. There's no separateness within the whole
It's all
of
it's all
different.
one. Yeah, it's and again that's what I've been thinking for quite some time. Some of the spiritual people in the Northern Ireland UFO Society have believed that as well, and we had like a what I would call a spiritual mentor, who's pretty much saying what you are saying. You know that's what she used to tell me. All that sort of stuff as well. And it's funny that you mentioned David Icke, because I was thinking some of the stuff that you were saying is a very like it's something that David Icke would say, and you know a lot of people sort of poo poo the idea of David. As soon as you mention his name, people are like, yeah, you know, he's nuts or he's mental and all that sort of stuff. But there's a lot of things he's been talking about that has been proven true time and time again. And I guess a more recent example is the demise of physical currency in favor of an electronic credit system, which will be given to you, it'll be dictated by like a social credit score, which is already rolled out in China.
Yes, he's really on the ball. And I can understand why people would think he's crazy, because some of the stuff that he says is way out there if you're a normal person.
And that's why they always say, if there are aliens, why do governments not tell us about? Why would they hide it? And that is a perfect example why, because a lot of people will not be mentally ready for it. It's we're just not mentally mature enough as a people yet. But going back to what you were saying, sorry, about
Can
the
I?
yeah, go
So
ahead.
sorry,
No,
Chris.
no, do
I'm
please go ahead.
sorry. Can I just address that? Because in my understanding, in my core belief, every system on Earth is run by negative ET energy, including the governments, especially the governments, are at one of the highest control systems on Earth, are the governments. They control us like no other system. So given that, in my understanding, they are run by negative ET energies, a disclosure is not going to come from them. It's
Definitely
not going
not.
to happen,
Yeah.
in my understanding.
You know, I have been following the UFO side of things for quite some time. And the thing that you hear time and time again, that the disclosure is close, it's imminent, But you find that it's the people on the lecture circuit. That's their little carrot that they dangle in front of you, to try and, I suppose it keeps them relevant. I'm not going to name any names, but, you get that quite a lot. But going back to your, the energy from the negative energy from, negative forces, who are those? Do you know who the negative ETs are, and where is it coming from?
Well, there's many different races, both positive and negative. The universe is teeming with life. There's a vast universe out there that is cosmic, that is interdimensional, that has many different dimensions and parallel lifetimes. We have been controlled and dumbed down and manipulated to believe that if you can't touch it or see it or smell it, it's not real. And part of that is to do with the CIA and the FBI setting up programs for people, because they were well aware of the awakening process to do with ascension, where we are actually evolving and becoming much more aware. And people are waking up now like never before. So it's just, I'm sorry, I was going off on a rant.
No, that's fine. I get what you're saying, because people are actually becoming more aware, and more. They're wakening up to it, and you can see that the powers that be are actually panicking, because there's a lot of forms of censorship that's incoming. A lot of people are very uncomfortable talking about it, but it does. If you do read, not read any literature, but if you read the sort of situation and what's happening in the world, you can actually see it coming. And all these, I quote, I'm doing the quotation thing with my fingers as I say this, the conspiracy theories are actually proven to be true. You really need to keep an eye on that. Another question, sorry, that's just popped in. I had a whole list of questions here. That fascinated me, but I knew this would happen. That as I'm listening to you, I would get loads of questions that would pop into my head. And another one is, as you were talking about their contracts, how their contracts are renewed and then being terminated and what have you. Do those contracts relate or coincide with, let's say, the galactic cycle, the orbit of our solar system around the galaxy, and our solar cycles as well? Do they relate to them?
Yeah, very much. It's all connected. It's all connected. Some information that they shared with me over the last couple of months was that, and often I get information and downloads in information and words, but I also get images at the same time. And I don't normally talk about the images or share the images, but I do share the information. But this particular image I was seeing as I was downloading information and words was a beautiful image of a clockwork, and it was the whole universe that turned into clockworks. So you had all these segments of clockworks and circular machinery in clockworks that covered the whole universe, where you had different aspects. You had ascension, you had political, you had military, you had big pharma, you had vaccines, and it's all connected. Everything is connected. It's all interwoven. Nothing is separate from anything else. It's all connected. So the contracts are connected. It's all connected. It's all working in unison with, even if it appears to be separate and in the distance and completely separate, there is a connection. There is clockwork going on behind the scene that we can't even see.
I would imagine it would be scary to see that sort of stuff and to know what was coming. So maybe ignorance is bliss in this sense. It's just that there's a guy who I follow on YouTube. He's called Suspicious Observers. And the best way I could describe him is an independent scientist, because he won't get funding because he goes against the mainstream narrative for science. But he seems to, according to his data and his research, suggests that we have a lot of energy coming out from the center of the galaxy now, which is affecting every star as that band of energy arrives to it. And it's already affecting Earth. And we are potentially, the magnetic poles are moving quite fast now. That's a given. And it does appear that at some point the Earth's crust will displace, rotate, and then you get all the, not an extinction level event by any means, but he calls it a catastrophe. And it just made me think, the way you were talking earlier on, it's making me think, does it relate to those sort of timelines? Which it would. It would make sense that it actually did, to be fair. And that's another guy who I want to really speak to on this podcast. I've got to send him a message to get him onto it. One of the other things, that I seen on your website is that contactee and experiencer and abductee. Can you shed a little bit more light on that? Because that interests me a lot as well.
Yeah, I've had numerous experiences throughout my life that began in very early childhood. Um, and I was living in Ireland in Louisburg when I began to have, sorry, that's not true. Actually, I was in Galway when I began to, in 2009, I think it was, when I began to have um, abductee experiences with the Greys, where I was taken on board ship. And that was actually before I began channeling the Pleiadians. I was taken on board ship and I had a very negative experience. That's in my book.
Yeah,
I'll put it that way. It's all in my book. But I was taken on board ship and I couldn't get back into my body. There was some type of wall or a wall of energy or force field, and I'd been leaving my body for years and I always knew how to get back in, but in this particular experience I wasn't able to get back into my body. That they had done something where they wanted to keep me on board ship and I wasn't able to get back into my body, and that was more scary to me than the experience itself, which was horrendous. I could hear people, and women in particular, screaming in agony on the ship. And there was one grey on my left, and there was two on my right. And they were quite small. They typical greys, in appearance. And that whole experience is in my book.
and that gives me reason to actually go out and get it, because I love reading people's experiences, what have you. And the Greys is always a common reoccurrence. Loads of people have their own theories on what the Greys are, whether they're demons, what angels actually are. They might even just be extraterrestrials and what have you. Do you have a theory on, or do you know 100% who the Greys are?
I don't. I still have questions about the Greys, but they seem to be very much have the energy of worker bees, because in that experience, one of the things I got from it is that and I think they said this to me in the experience, that they were just working and doing their job. They didn't seem to be negative or positive. They were just purely kind of focused on the work that they needed to do. Although I did feel that they were controlled by and kind of owned by negative ET energy above them. They were kind of like soldiers that were employed to carry out duties. That's kind of my feeling with them.
Yeah, because I've heard this gentleman is dead now, but the late David Hugo Boyle described the Greys as they're sort of soulless, and what they're trying to do is develop hybrids between their race and the human race and other spiritual races to try and have a soul. Because they're very, just as you described, they're very focused, which tells us that they're very analytical, very logical, and they can't experience the sort of spiritual emotions that we would have. And I think that is one of the key things that they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's key, Chris, because they in that experience that I had, they did seem to have there was no compassion, there was no understanding, there was no empathy. There was no empathy for the experiments that they were carrying out on me or the other people on the ship. I wasn't alone on that ship. There was a lot of people on the ship that were crying out in agony because of the experiments that they were doing to us. And I heard them talking to each other telepathically. And I think it was the one on the left said to the other two telepathically, "This one is different." And I didn't really understand what they meant by that at the time. But I understand a lot more now about who I am and where I come from, and my own energy, and that I am different, that I am a hybrid, because they knew before I did that this one is different. And then in some manner of speaking, I was let go, but I still couldn't go back into my body. But the people were still on the ship while I was trying to get back into my body. But they do have a total. They don't have any empathy. They don't have any. That they definitely don't have the love frequency within them.
And that's probably, yeah, again, explains why they do what they seem to do. You've got another book, which is called "What's Really Going On," if that's correct, if memory serves me correct. What's that book about, and what does it entail?
That is more to do with the events around COVID and what's going on behind the scenes. It's a very alternative view of COVID and the vaccines and the mandates and the lockdown, along the lines of a conspiracy theorist. Although the word conspiracy theorist was set up as a program by the CIA, I believe.
I
I'm
think it
not
was in
sure
the
what year it was
50s.
set
I
up.
think it might have been the 50s
Perhaps
decade.
sorry?
I think it might have been in the 50s decade, the late 50s, I think, if memory serves me correct.
I think you're right, Chris. I think it was the 50s. So the word, a lot of the spiritual words have a negative connotation for a reason, and one of those is the phrase conspiracy theorist, and also psychic and medium, and there's a lot of spiritual words that have negative connotation because that is a program. They've programmed us to have some false beliefs around metaphysical subjects and esoteric knowledge and UFOs. UFOs have always existed. We've never been alone. We don't come from here. Earth has been, actually, one of the biggest things that they've shared with me is that Earth has been tweaked to enable humanity to exist upon it. So we have air, we have trees, we have the oceans, we have everything in perfect alignment. The sun is a prime example. Everything is perfectly aligned for humanity to exist on the earth, and that was tweaked. That wasn't how things were originally with the earth. Things were adapted to enable humanity to exist upon the earth.
That sounds about right. There's a lot of coincidences where the distance of the moon, for example, from Earth, and its size in relation to the sun, so it perfectly covers out the sun. Even the moon. Even NASA said that the moon is hollow after they flew a probe into the underside of it, and they even said it. You can search it online, that it rang like a bell for ages afterwards. So it does sort of imply that it's artificial, because I don't know of any other planetary body in our solar system that is hollow, which suggests that it is, well, I can't say man-made, but it's definitely artificial. That is for sure.
Yeah, I don't believe that man built the moon. I think it was extraterrestrial that built the moon.
Definitely,
And
yeah.
I don't think it was a positive ET race that did it. But I was shown that there was a previous moon and the moon that we have now is not the original, and it was created for whatever reason to affect us in a negative way.
It sort of goes back to the Anunnaki when it comes to their story of creation, Tiamat and Marduk. For example, those are the sort of planetary bodies that smashed into what was Earth and created the moon and what have you. Or words to that effect anyway. It's sort of relates to what they're saying. Especially if they take credit, like the Anunnaki, it's Enlil, who is also known as Yahweh and what have you, who takes credit for creating the heavens and the earth and the moon and all that sort of stuff. So it really does. It's amazing how everything just seems to roll in to everything. Everything connects. And again, that's what NIUFOS was founded for, to find all these connections. And you can pretty much see it everywhere that you look. And it is a fascinating thing. And then, again, going back to your COVID book, where the term conspiracy theorist is thrown around, that's the first thing that the media go to, isn't it? Whenever somebody questions the narrative, it's usually conspiracy theorist or conspiracy theory is usually within the first or second paragraph. It's priming you up to already dismiss it. Absolutely fascinating. Now, I've got a couple more minutes left. Where can we find you? How can we get your books? And do you run any sort of conferences or any workshops that people can go to?
Well, people can find me on my website, thepleiadianchild.com. My email is thepleiadianchild@hotmail.com. I'm Soma Ara on Facebook. I do readings for people. I do 3 main different types of readings. One is a regular reading for kind of regular people or normies. The second one is readings for starseeds. And then I have a more advanced readings that are direct voice channeled trance Pleiadian channelings for people that are more advanced. So I have 3 main different types of readings. I'm also running, recently started to run a spiritual workshop, which is every Monday evening at 7 p.m, which is €11.77. And then I have free cosmic gatherings once a month on the 7th day of every month. And that is mostly for starseeds, where I do free channeling once a month. And that is from 7 until 10 p.m. UK time. So I have those main things going on, which keep me very busy. But I love what I do. I totally love it. And sometimes when I do channeling or readings or any type of spiritual work or even interviews like this one, I come away feeling like I've taken drugs, because I get such a high off it. The Pleiadian energy really puts me onto into a high frequency. So it's a wonderful thing to do. I totally love what I do. I wouldn't change it for the universe.
No, I can see why, because when you go to all these meetings with UFO friends, or even the conference that I'm going to, the Awakening Conference in Manchester, which I believe is happening in August, you always come away feeling on a high, really buzzed and charged. It's just the energy really does, it's very infectious, and I really understand what you're saying when it comes to that, and I really hope the other people listening to this, that they can relate to that and see, because it's a wonderful experience. It is. This is why you need to get to know and mix with the like-minded people as well. It's absolutely fantastic. I would like to bring you up to a NIUFOS meeting at some point. Perhaps we can do that and get to know you in person. Maybe you can even do some readings for us up there. I don't know. But Soma Ara, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast this evening. It has been fascinating. I just wish I didn't cut it to 45 minutes. There's a lot more we could talk about. Maybe I'll get you on to another episode, but thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Chris. It's been wonderful to connect with you, and I love your energy, and your voice is just, it's beautiful. It's divine, your voice is.
I don't know. Others might be sick of it. But again, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon. fascinating stuff. This, the metaphysical side of ufology, the spiritual side, the Pleiadians, etc., absolutely fascinate me. It's a completely different rabbit hole to go down, and so many different avenues and branches to explore. It's just an absolute plethora of topics and knowledge to go down, and it sounds like my guest definitely has the know-how, the knowledge, and the experience to have a chat with about that. So hopefully, and I do mean this, I would like to get her back onto another podcast. But if it's not possible, then I'll just be selfish and pick her brains myself to see what other new things and interesting things I can learn from it. Absolutely riveting conversation. Really buzzed after that now. It's fantastic. Moving on to the NIUFOS Open Day, which is coming up very, very soon. It's coming up on the 11th of March. It should be happening in Belfast from about 11 o'clock in the morning, right up to, well, we'll pencil it in up until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. People can come and go as they please, and it sounds like that she could join us there. Samara Ra could be there, which would be fantastic. But because of the interest that we've got in this, it does look like that we're going to need a bigger venue than what we were initially thinking. Not anything massive. We're just hoping maybe in a hotel lobby, something a bit more intimate and quiet. But if we want to get the equipment and what have you out as well, then it'll probably be in the Crescent Arts Centre. If I was a betting man, that is where it will be. So if you're still interested in joining NIUFOS and meeting us, then give us a message and we'll get back in contact with you and we will let you know where the venue will be. But the Crescent Arts is an old favourite of ours, and I'd like to get back in there again. Now we'll move on to the celestial events. There's only one real significant thing that I will talk about. If you've been looking up at the sky, you've seen the planets up there that have aligned, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Venus, etc. Even Uranus is up there. But coming up on the 20th of February, it is the new moon. This is the best time to conduct a watch night during a lunar phase. It'll allow you to see fainter objects in the night sky with the naked eye, with the unaided eye. So if you're looking to conduct a watch night at some point during February, then my recommendation, if it's a clear night of course, is the 20th of February, whenever we will have a new moon. Not to be confused with a full moon. A new moon means it's not there or it's covered in shadow. So light will not be polluting the night sky. Well, that was it. That is an absolutely fascinating podcast episode that I've done, episode number 2. Might be hard to debate, I don't know. But until next time, thank you for listening. My name's Chris McMurray, and you've been listening to the Close Encounters podcast, the official podcast of the Northern Ireland UFO Society. See you soon.